This is Boxing Talk 8576, man. This video is gonna be I'm taking a second look at Errol Spence because after the before the Kell Brook fight, I had my opinions about Errol Spence, and I pointed out some things on previous videos about Errol Spence, and now after the fight, this is my second look at Errol Spence. Like I said, uh, congratulations to Errol Spence. He went to the UK, to Sheffield, to Brook's backyard, beat Brook in his backyard. That's very hard for mentally for a fighter to travel in his first time at a world title at that to get the victory. He not only got the victory, he got the stoppage. So much credit goes to Errol Spence. And um, what I want to talk about is the fight itself and other things. But let's go to the fight and the things I liked and the things I didn't like about the fight. The things I liked was Errol Spence showed grit. He showed good stamina because it was a physical fight. Kell Brook made it a physical fight by holding him when he get close to the ropes and kind of pushing Errol Spence around in the ring, which I thought he was pushing him around in the ring and using his physical strength to try to. I think they was trying to wear Spence down for the later rounds, and I thought Spence handled that. I thought he handled it. Well overall. In the first half, I don't think he handled it that well, but in the second half, I thought he handled it better. Um, I like that he compete, that he did compete. Every time Kell Brook tried to take the play away from him, he did compete and he showed that he was still there, still in the fight. Okay, what I didn't like was when he came out, he was very tentative. He, you know, before the fight, he was telling Kell Brook not to run, not to take a step back, and he wasn't gonna take a step back. But Errol Spence did not. Kell Brook came out. Kell Brook came out in the center of the ring, ready to fight. Errol Spence looked like he was a little, taken back that Kell Brook was standing there ready to fight, and he was kind of like looked like to me like he was kind of tentative the first couple rounds. Errol Spence was. I thought after 6 rounds, I had Kell Brook up 4-2, so Errol Spence on my scorecards was losing the fight. It was some close rounds in some of those rounds, which you could swing, but I thought Kell Brook controlled range. I thought Kell Brook was more consistent in the center of the ring. I thought he was landing more punches. I thought he was, even though Earl Spence was landing some body shots, Earl Spence was landing one body shot at a time. When they got close to the ropes, Kell Brook held him and spent him around and got off the ropes, which that's what I said Kell Brook was going to do before the fight. He did that very well in the first half of the fight. Um, and what I didn't like about the fight, Spence was, I didn't like the fact that Spence don't move his head. He has no upper body movement, and he doesn't even move his feet well enough to get his head out the way. I thought Kell Brook hit him with any punch he wanted to hit him with. Just about all Kell Brook had to do was throw the punches. Kell Brook, to me, was looking. He was throwing arm punches. He wasn't throwing his punches fluent. It wasn't like Spence was elusive and wasn't there for him to land the punches. Spence was there for him to land the punches. I just didn't think that Kell Brook punches was coming out, with nice snap. I thought he was pushing his punches a lot, and that's another thing about Earl Spence. He doesn't move his head. He has no upper body movement, and he moves his feet. He can cut off the ring pretty good, but he doesn't use his feet for defense. He doesn't use his feet for getting out the way of punches. When a guy throws more than one punch at him, I see that he goes into the shell. He shells up when you throw more than one punch at him. So, but he did pull off the victory. Now, let's talk about the future. I hear that people say Errol Spence is number one because he beat Kell Brook. No, he's not. He's not number one because he beat Kell Brook. The only two guys that got argument for number one is Manny Pacquiao and Keith Thurman. I put Keith Thurman number one because Keith Thurman got 2 belts, and Keith Thurman beat the last two opponents that Keith Thurman beat were in the top 10, were rated in the top 10 of welterweights when at the time he beat them. Now Earl Spence got one guy that he beat that was rated in the top 10. Manny Pacquiao beat Vargas, which I think Vargas was rated. I think Vargas rated in the top 10 the time that he beat Vargas because Vargas was a WBO champion, so Vargas should have been ranked in the top 10, and he had beat before that he had beat Bradley, who was rated in the top 10. So the two people that get argument is number one is Keith Thurman and Pacquiao. If you really want to get right down to it. Now, in my book, Errol Spence probably moves to number 3. I got Errol Spence as number 3 now that he won that fight, but he's not the number 1 welterweight. But anyway, him and Keith Thurman will fight to see who's the number 1 welterweight between those two, because if Keith Thurman beat him, Keith Thurman will have another belt. If he beat Keith Thurman, he will have 3 belts, which will make him number 1. But at this moment, I got Errol Spence as number 3. Now, I want to see him fight Keith Thurman right away. I know Keith Thurman got an elbow surgery. He had elbow surgery. He said he will be back by November. Hopefully, he'll be back by November so they can fight, so they can get that fight on in December or whatever. But Errol Spence, to me, he's still not a special fighter. To me, Errol Spence he has a average fighting style, which is not bad because he is fundamentally sound in some things that he does. He uses his jab. He goes to the body very well, which a lot of fighters don't go to the body as much as he goes to the body. He goes to the body very well. And he can cut off the ring, which is important. He can cut off the ring. But the things that he showed me in the Kell Brook fight are the things that I keep on telling people the reason why Keith Thurman would beat him. And Keith Thurman has multiple ways that he can beat Errol Spence. Keith Thurman can use his feet very well. Even though Errol Spence can cut off the ring, Keith Thurman can use his feet very well. And Keith Thurman can take a page out of what Kell Brook was doing in the fight. When you get close to the ropes, you hold and you turn the man. You don't hold to like on for dear life. You just hold just enough to turn the man. You can turn Errol Spence and his back will be up against the ropes. The only thing about Kell Brook turned Errol Spence, but he didn't throw no punches when he had after he turned Errol Spence. Keith Thurman would have to throw punches after he turned Errol Spence. But you can turn Errol Spence and you can take the fight back to the center of the ring, which Errol Spence is not. Errol Spence do not look comfortable in the center of the ring. He does not look as fluent and as confident in the center of the ring as he looked when he gets you on the ropes. When Errol Spence gets you on the ropes, he looks very confident. His punches come out fluent, snap, power. But in the center of the ring, he looks a little, I'm not gonna say lost, but he just looks a little lethargic. Just looks a little like he's thinking a lot, but he's not throwing the punches. And another thing, he doesn't throw feints, so he doesn't throw you off in the center of the ring. Guys like Keith Thurman can keep you in the center of the ring if you want to keep the fight in the center of the ring, and he can beat you in the center of the ring. He can beat you to the punch. Keith Thurman will be faster than Kell Brook was, and Keith Thurman right hand to me has more snap. Keith Thurman is more of an explosive puncher, so his punches will come off different than what Kell Brooks came off. Kell Brooks did have some power in his punches, but he was pushing his punches instead of snapping his punches out, and that would be the difference in power with Keith Thurman. And another thing, Keith Thurman throws combinations. And like I see it in the center of the ring, it seems like to me that Errol Spence likes to shell up if you throw more than one punch at him. So, that could be a problem against a fighter like Keith Thurman. That could be a problem against a fighter like Terrence Crawford. And then I heard a podcast, I heard a guy say Keith Thurman and Crawford was too small. Keith Thurman and Crawford are not too small for Errol Spence because Errol Spence is not a physical fighter. Errol Spence goes to the body, but he's not a physical fighter. Errol Spence is not going to push you to the ropes. He's not going to hold you. He's not going to lean on you. He doesn't use his physical stature to rough you up. He's not a Sean Porter. He doesn't rough you up. Now, what he likes to do, he likes to walk you back to the ropes so he can work on your body more and throw a lot of punches to your body on the ropes. But he's not going to push you to the ropes. He's not going to hold you. He's not going to lean on you. So his physical weight is not going to be a problem for Keith Thurman or Terrence Crawford. Keith Thurman and Terrence Crawford will beat Errol Spence for the simple fact that these two guys can keep the fight in the center of the ring. And what they seen with Brook is all you have to do is hold when you get to the ropes. All you have to do is hold Errol Spence and turn him because he's coming forward and he's worried about throwing punches. Errol Spence, he doesn't worry about too much about defense. He's not. I don't see Errol Spence as a person that's trying to set traps for you or anything like that, Earl Spence he has one gear. He comes straight forward. I mean, there's nothing bad about it, but he comes straight forward. He's like a bull. You know what I'm saying? He's like a bull, and you gotta fight him like he's a bull. You gotta let him come forward. You gotta set traps, which Keith Thurman and Crawford, those guys can set traps for you. Those guys are intelligent fighters inside the ring. And then people say, oh, Keith Thurman is gonna run. Keith Thurman never runs. Keith Thurman just uses his legs in the ring when he needs to use his legs. It's just throwing a different look at you when he does that. Which, I know a lot of people say, oh man, when Mayweather move around, that's masterful. So it's masterful when Keith Thurman moves around. It's masterful when Crawford moves around. You can't say it's masterful for one guy and it ain't masterful for the next guy, because the McDonough 2 fight, Mayweather moved around the ring a whole lot, and people said it was a masterful performance. So I don't want to hear about that. All of a sudden, it's not a masterful performance when the next guy moves. But anyway, that's my take on it. That's my second look at Errol Spence. I don't see Errol Spence as a special fighter. I don't see him as a dynamic fighter. I see Errol Spence as a basic fighter, which is nothing wrong with being a basic fighter, but he's easy to game plan for. I'm not saying he's easy to beat, but he's easy to have a game plan for. If you have the talent like Keith Thurman or Crawford, you can beat Errol Spence because they have the natural tools that they naturally do in the ring to be able to stage off a fighter like Errol Spence. I'm not saying the fight will be easy. What I'm saying is those guys can beat Errol Spence. Carol Brook was up 4-2 on my scorecard in the first half of the fight. Carol Brook fell apart in the last half of the fight. I know he suffered another orbital bone breakage, which was due to Errol Spence. So Errol Spence get all the credit for breaking his eye socket, just like Triple G got credit for breaking his eye socket. So now the welterweight division is getting a little bit more. The picture is getting a little bit more clearer. So the next fight I want to see is Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman. This is my second look at Errol Spence. This is Box Talk 8576. I'm out.